Thank you, Mr. Karthik, and good afternoon to all of you on the other side to this webinar on achieving business excellence through total quality management. In fact, this topic may not be new to all. Some of you on the sitting there could also be already practicing TQM. So I hope during this seminar there will be two types of outcome. For the new people, I'm sure this would give an awareness and an interest in implementing TQM in your organizations. And for those who are practicing TQM already, I hope this would help you to find those small gold nuggets that you have been searching during your total TQM implementation. Thereby, some new ideas or some answers to some of your questions will come through. So that's the will be the objective of this seminar. What are the contents that I will be covering today? We'll first of all try to understand why TQM, because for every initiative that we take, it's good to understand the purpose behind it. We'll try to understand how TQM has evolved, and then we will look at TQM, its definitions, and not just verbal definitions, also how you can visualize it so that we can understand it and memorize it better. Then we come to the most important aspect of this whole webinar, namely the components of TQM. I would say there are three different components of TQM. The first one is the principles of TQM. The second one is the systems of TQM, and then the methods of TQM. So we will dwell on each one of this at a bit of length. Thereby we will be able to get some basics of this, and maybe over a period of time we will try to see how it expands in different webinars of the same nature. Once we do this, then we look at the models for TQM. As some of you may be aware, there are different models across the globe for TQM. So we'll look at those models. We will try to understand the commonality between them and the specifics behind each one of them. And finally, we will look at some of the approaches for TQM implementation. How can an organization go for TQM implementation, or how can an organization strengthen its TQM implementation? This is going to be the contents. Before I go into the proper session, I would like you to look at some of the pictures that are now coming up on the scene. As you see them one by one, right? You got different pictures. You got Pele there, you got Lata Mangeshkar, and of course our own A.R. Rahman, proud with his two the statuettes with him. So when we look at all of this, what does spring to our mind immediately? Or if I were to ask, what is common between all of them, and what does it make them different? If there is one question that is asked, I'm sure the answer that comes to most of our mind, if someone were to describe each one of them, if someone was to give them a trait across all the pictures that you hear, the first and foremost that comes to our mind is they are world class. I think undoubtedly in the respective area, each one of the pictures that we see here are world class. Of course, it's not limited to the ones that we are seeing here. If you are a Ilayaraja fan, or if you are a fan of Rahul Dravid, it does not mean that they are world class. This is just some examples of people or vehicles or buildings that we can term as world class. Or these could also be the epitomes of excellence. So if we look at them, immediately our recollection is that they are the models of excellence in their own field, which means every individual in this field, in their respective field, tries to emulate or dreams of becoming one like those that we are seeing on this picture. So excellence is that trait in an individual or an object or an organization that would urge others in the same field to emulate them. That is what we could call as excellence. So if we look at it, what they got or what they are is important on one side, but more important for us to understand is how did they get there. So if you look at these people, how did they get to this position? Of course, there can be many traits which can be attached to the individuals. For example, passion. Every one of them, I'm sure you will say, were passionate about what they were doing, passionate about music or passionate about cricket and so on. Each one of them had utmost dedication and commitment to their chosen field. They have reflected time and time again that in their professional delivery, they were so much committed to their field. Very, very surprisingly, or actually not surprisingly, humility, we would have sensed, is a trait across all of these individuals. And one of the last aspects could be discipline. In spite of achieving high levels, they continue to remain, they remain during their career, and they continue to remain very disciplined and to all the things that were required to be done to achieve that level and retain that level. But traits alone have not got them there. Above the traits, they had many, many practices which they did without any fail continuously. For example, continuously learning about new things in their own field, learning from across the borders, etc. Rigorous practicing of their own profession. It's very, very, many of us would have heard Sachin Tendulkar, even today, when he's in Bombay, he goes for his net practice at the famous Gymkhana whenever he has spare time. Similarly, they gave their usual time to fitness, to remain fit and alert. They were constantly evolving. They flowed with the time and they constantly tried to learn new things, and in their field, they have been constantly innovating on what they have done so far, innovating of what they have tried to benchmark and learn from others, innovating and thereby retaining their freshness, which they shared with their own admirers, and thereby retaining this high place. And finally, which is very, very important for you to achieve excellence, is they were willing to learn from mistakes. What we call today as a PDCA in TQM language. This meant that people were learning, they were willing to learn from their mistakes, they were willing to learn and adapt themselves and overcome these mistakes, and they converted this into their own strength. We all know about Sachin Tendulkar, how he was suffering from McGrath in the beginning stages, but how he soon overcame that by rigorous practice, and he started mastering Glenn McGrath over a period of time. So in this manner, all of these people also displayed or also did all these practices on a regular basis, and together with their traits, it was these that have helped them to get to this position. Why it becomes important is, similarly in an organizational context, it is important for us to have a combination of traits and practices. What they are is what we will be seeing shortly. In a similar way, what do organizations aspire for? We have seen the personal context. When it comes to organizations, what do they aspire for? Any organization, if it's an average one today, all of them aspire to transform from average to good, and over a period of time to go from good to great, or what we call as excellent, and achieve the status of world class in their own field, etc. We have heard about innumerable organizations who have done this transformation very successfully. Many of them have been benchmarks for others. Some of them remain to be benchmark in their own businesses even today. And you would have read from many management books of this nature of how they want to achieve excellence and how they have strived to achieve, and they were able to transform themselves from average to excellent. So in this manner, this is almost the aspiration for every organization, to move from average to world class. So we need to understand, therefore, what defines world class in a business context. What defines world class in a business context, if you see, is it high profits, or Is it outstanding quality, whether you are in the service industry, whether you are in the manufacturing sector, whether you manufacture chemicals or you manufacture auto components? Is it outstanding quality that defines world class in a business? Or is it the customer loyalty, the loyalty that makes your customers repeat their orders with you, come back to you time and time again, giving you the position of market leadership? Is it a wide product range? You have across the spectrum in your own chosen field. Is it a wide product range that you can define? More importantly, is it the employee engagement, how your people love your organization and how the people are engaged with the organization? Does some of this or all of this define world class? We cannot pinpoint and say it is some of this or choose one and two. We also need not go by this, that all of them are important in a world-class organization. Sometimes you have 3 or 4 of this, say maybe some of them are missing, but you will still find that most of the organizations that we would recall as world-class tend to show all of these properties when we talk about them. For any successful organization, if we look at it, what are therefore the drivers for organizational success? So you can say that there are 3 different drivers. There are many more, but the 3 key drivers, as we can see here, the drivers that mesh very well with each other, that need to mesh very well with each other to drive an organization towards success. First is people. When I say people, it means the culture in the organization. It could also mean the engagement, as we saw earlier. The way the people are involved in the organization is one aspect. The second aspect is the technology of the organization. Technology by itself is very, very key for organizational success. So every world leader has got the highest levels of technology in their chosen field. Whether you, once again, whether you're manufacturing or you're in service, the particular technology that pertains to your business, how well you have absorbed these technologies, how well you have implemented them is a very, very important aspect. And driving these comes management, which means how the organization is managed, how the people are managed, how the technology is managed, all these aspects together. So the 3 different drivers of people, technology and management should mesh very well together to ensure an organizational success. And at the same time, we should also realize that one cannot substitute for the other. We need to have excellence in all 3 of them to achieve world-class standards. Now, today in this webinar, we will focus maximum on the management aspects of this drivers is what we will focus, and the management, which is come to be known as total quality management, is what we are going to focus upon. And therefore, what is the management system for world class which drives? The most reliable path that has been repeatedly proven, and as Dale Carnegie said in his book, time tested, organization tested management system which ensures world class, first and foremost is excellence needs to be achieved through performance. If you recall the photos that we saw, unless we can attribute consistent performance, leadership performance from these individuals, we will not attach the attribute of excellence to these individuals. We would not have, and we will never do that. Therefore, performance which is world class, performance which is a differentiator from your competition is very, very important for you to be called as excellence in your field. And therefore, the question of how to get to this performance, by which way of management, has come to be answered by the management system called as total quality management. So, total quality management or TQM is not an end by itself. I think we should all understand very clearly that TQM is the management system that helps us to achieve performance a performance that is repetitive in nature, a performance that could turn to be breakthroughs, and a performance which is definitely world class and therefore able to get our organizations the tag of excellence. So if we need to achieve excellence in our organizational performance, we need to understand what makes up total quality management and how we practice total quality management and how we can implement total quality management in our own organizations. Sorry. What do we mean by world-class performance? Now, to understand what are the results or the effects of TQM, what we meant by world-class performance, which is very, very differentiating from competition. You can see many of the graphs that are shown here across a spectrum of organizational effects, right from overall sales to sales in exports to participation of people, how it is moving up, to defects, how they keep coming down in time, to supplier retention, and also to areas like dealer satisfaction survey and so on and so forth. A spectrum of organizational results is what we see here. The source for this is from the Deming Prize winners. For the sake of ease and for the sake of authenticity, I have picked up these results from some of the Deming Prize winners presentations at the JUSE website. You could also be able to, if you hit the JUSE website, you will be able to see some of these presentations, all of which talk about how the performance of the organization changed over a period of time as they implemented TQM. And one definite thing that we can notice is that it's primarily on a continual improvement path, and more importantly, whenever there could be some dips due to maybe environmental considerations and so on and so forth, how quickly the organization is able to recover and bring it back under control and bring it back to the required levels that was wanted. This is the beauty of TQM, helping you to recover when things have not gone right, the PDCA aspect of TQM. So this is the levels of performance of TQM that can help us to achieve. Of course, there could be many different levels as you could, if you will read from the winners' presentations. These are just some samples which I'm sure would excite us on how to implement TQM. Now, before we go into the aspects, it's very important to understand that TQM did not come as a practice overnight. It was not a direct start for the entirety of TQM to be absorbed by organizations. TQM had evolved over a period of time, and we can understand this evolution from two different perspectives. The first perspective is the quality perspective. What we mean by quality is how the meaning of quality as it was understood enhanced over a period of time, and how organizational practices and systems were set up to answer these enhancement. To start with, it was all quality of conformity through control. We know this aspect. You put a coat on a pole and keep, then people will look better. We have heard of this famous idiom, and what it means is quality as it went out of the company was maximum control. It was more through control and defect segregation and moving the good product to the next stage or to the ultimate customer, which was the topmost priority in the minds of people and which was the topmost practice. Hence, the meaning of quality or the way it was delivered to the customer was primarily through control, which ensured quality of conformity. But it had its obvious drawbacks, especially when the world got more and more competitive, when the value of goods increased, you cannot afford to scrap and so on and so forth. Quality of conformity purely through control was no longer an answer to management, and therefore came the next stage of evolution, which you can call as quality of performance and design by assurance. which came to be known as quality assurance, which means there was a lot of focus on the upstream processes. Even during the process design or the product design, people were addressing the needs of the customer. People were designing the products in such a way, both the product and the process. And along the processes, they built many assurance practices which ensured that the product as it was made to the required levels of quality. So by this, it was not purely control, though control continues to exist. It was not purely by control. It minimized the role of control but enhanced the role of assurance by either by design, and many other aspects like statistical techniques and so on had come into the picture. Both of this still by and large were addressing the product and to some extent the process. And therefore, many other facets of an organization, let's say for example in a marketing sense or in the HR sense, etc., were still gray areas, and therefore people sensed that unless an organization as a totality, as you are always taught in a proper gymnasium, that building the body would mean, all around building is what is, wellness is what is considered as wellness. In a similar way, many experts, many people realized that the way for organizations to sustain is not just by quality assurance. The entire aspect of the organization need to be addressed, and therefore quality of organization became the mindset. And this over a period of time has come to be called as total quality management. And therefore TQM means the organizational quality in totality, and hence for the core portion of TQM, which is the Q, this is how the evolution has taken place from QC to QA to TQM. If you see this over a time period, this has been a continuum, and as you would see, starting from roughly around 1911, when scientific inspection methods were introduced, followed by the SQC when the volumes of production increased, and so on, there has been a continuum of change starting from QC, moving towards organizational quality, which has earned different names, starting from total quality control in 1969 as it was titled, to TQM and TQC and so on. Over a period of time across the globe, the name of TQM has become synonymous with excellence. So you now find that both TQM and business excellence are synonymous words that are used for an organization that becomes a leader in its own chosen field and becomes a benchmark for the other organizations. In the same manner, it's also important to understand how the management has evolved or metamorphosized over a period of time. We can take it over generations of management. The first generation was management by doing, so people believed that they had to do many things by themselves. But this was very good for individual-oriented trade, etc., trades. But when it became organizational, people had to necessarily go towards the second generation, which was management by directive, when you had a team of people working for you and your way to achieve the organizational performance was to direct these people. Unfortunately, this sometimes used to take the form of micromanagement, and people had to go down and try to tell people, this is the way you have to do it. What they call as this my way or the highway kind of situation. So it became too much of management by directive, stifling people's creativity and so on. And from there, the management methods moved to the next generation. When people realized the shortcomings of the micromanagement, it moved towards the third generation of management, which was managing by results. So you of course manage the processes, but you fix some results, key results for the organization, key results for each of every process, and looking at these results, try to understand what the process is doing and try to improve the process and bring the results, which is the same as what a golf player would do. If the first shot misses the hole and goes back into some trough, as they call it, it can easily be corrected by playing one more stroke. But the bigger correction is to ask the question, why did my first shot go wrong and what I should change? And therefore, this way of approach of managing the process through the results move the management to the next level, what we can call as a third generation. And finally, as on date, by overall evolution, management has moved to management by planning, management by involvement of people, not only the top management, management by involvement of various people in the organization, each contributing their own way towards the improvement, each contributing in their own role towards organizational performance, achieving excellence as we discussed earlier. Now, this idea I have drawn from the book called Fourth Generation Management by Brian Joyner, where this is explained much more in detail. So, if you look at two aspects of TQM, which is the quality aspect, how it has evolved, and the management aspect, how it has evolved, both of this have gone together simultaneously, kind of, thereby giving rise to the current way of practicing or managing TQM, which has got different aspects. So if you look at one of the definitions, how you can define TQM, if I don't go into a specific discussion, we can say that TQM is the way of managing not only the current, it is also managing for the future, and specifically, as we discussed earlier, is far wider in its application than just assuring product or service quality. Many times, because of the word quality that we see here, there is a tendency to believe that this is assigned more to product or service quality, which is not so. TQM is a way of managing for the future. It goes across or much wider than product or service quality, and it is a way of managing people and business processes to ensure complete customer satisfaction at every stage. The customer satisfaction is the centric focus of TQM, and therefore it's a way of managing people and business process to ensure complete customer satisfaction at every stage, both internally as well as externally. It's not necessarily only within the organization. It's more important, once you are looking at from the customer viewpoint, manage the process both externally and internally. And this, as we all know today, the stakeholders have increased tremendously for every organization. We have got the society, we have got the again statutory requirements and so on and so forth. We have got governance from one side. So all of these, how does an organization manage the business processes that deliver these results at every stage is very, very important. And this way of management is what has come to know as TQM. So the most important point is TQM is not the responsibility of one function. It is not the responsibility of one department. Unless the organization as a totality is into TQM, the T from this will be missing, and hence we will not be able to achieve the desired outcome. And another beautiful aspect that must be seen is TQM, when it's combined with effective leadership, automatically results in an organization doing the right things right first time. As we all know, the most efficient way to do and most effective way, automatically this leads to the other aspects that we talked about, like customer satisfaction and other stakeholder satisfaction, thereby leading to the organization achieving a primary position in its own cluster, as you can call it. a definition from a Deming Price guideline, because one of the most respected models for total quality management, as many of you may be aware, is the Deming Price. And if I take directly the lines from the Deming Price guidelines, which is a little bit more of a classical definition, TQM can be defined as a set of systematic activities carried out by the entire organization. For what? To achieve the company objectives in an effective and efficient way. I'm sure we understand the subtle difference between effective and efficient, and the company objectives are what is the end result of TQM. Please remember this very well, because we are going to see the use of this or how it drives, we will see in later slides to come. So achieving the company objectives in a systematic way by the involvement of the entire organization is the purpose of TQM, thereby providing products and services to the satisfaction of the customers. You can call it as delight, you can call it by any name. So simply stated, satisfaction of the customers with a level of quality that satisfies the customers at the appropriate time and price. Please note that it is not necessarily the lowest price and the fastest time. It's the appropriate time and price that gives the customers the maximum satisfaction. So once again, we can see from this definition that customer satisfaction is the ultimate objective of TQM, and the company objectives are therefore set around this customer satisfaction, and TQM way of working helps us to achieve this effectively and efficiently. So in this definition, those words in red are those that one must remember and recognize very well when we discuss the points later. So how do we visualize TQM? Words are many, but as you all know, people tell that, picture tells 1,000 words, pictures tell a story that you can never forget, etc., etc. So how do we visualize TQM? The most quickest and the simplest but the most significant visualization that comes to all our minds, I'm sure, is the PDCA cycle, the plan, do, check and act cycle, which is now come to be known as the Deming wheel. So the plan, do, check and act is a very, very simplistically stated model of TQM. Every aspect of TQM in every process therefore centers around how well we execute the plan, do, check, act cycle in whatever we are doing. Another way to look at it, again given by fourth generation management, from fourth generation management by Brian Joyner, who is one of the topmost management gurus in the US. We can say that every organization is surrounded by three aspects. One is quality, which means it's defined by the customer. It goes beyond just fit to use. It should look at customer satisfaction in totality, understanding the current and future needs, etc., etc. So that's what is the broader definition of quality. So one looks at quality, one looks at scientific approach, as we saw earlier, managing the organization as a system. We recognize that different aspects of organization come together to form a system. Each one of them is important individually. They are more important when they mesh very well and they work together, which is the meaning of a good system. So organization should be viewed as a system and managed. We need to develop process thinking. As we saw earlier, results are the outcome. So manage by results, but manage the process. And whenever we talk about managing the process and taking decisions, it must be based on data and facts and not on hunches. So this is what one could call as a scientific approach. So with that view of quality, adapting this kind of a scientific approach, at the same time ensuring that all in one team is the mindset of the organization. That means everyone must be treated with respect, dignity, trust, openness. People should therefore feel free to come forward and air their views. People should feel free to first of all understand my weaknesses and try to correct. People should be in a position to do so openly with other colleagues. That's very, very irrespective of the hierarchy, is a very, very important aspect. And believing people and working towards a win-win situation for all the stakeholders. This is what we could call as all-in-one team, not necessarily restricted to the employees of the organization. Goes beyond just the employees. It goes to the entire stakeholders, like our suppliers or subcontractors, the institutions that provide us some service, and so on and so forth. So how all could become one team, can build mutual trust with each other, becomes a very, very important aspect. So this way of management is also a way of visualizing TQM. So when we move on to understand what are the components of TQM, having understood the way TQM has evolved, having understood the purpose behind implementing TQM, and hopefully having come to understand how TQM can be visualized. Therefore, the next step, logical step, is to understand what makes up TQM and what therefore should be done by an organization or should be adopted in an organization to become a TQM organization. If you look at it, you can say very broadly, we can say there are 4 different aspects. Like a jigsaw puzzle, it must fit with each other perfectly, which you can call as people first. I already talked about a lot about this. Then the principles of TQM, the systems of TQM, and the methods of TQM. So we already talked about the people, what should be the approach to people in the joiner triangle. We had seen how we must approach people. Now we will move forward to look at what I mean by principles of TQM, what is the various systems that make up for TQM, and what are the methods that help us to implement these systems. First of all, if you look at TQM principles, we can call them as a way of thinking. Why the word principle here is mainly because it's such a strong word, which means that I don't give up these principles come what may. Like Mahatma Gandhi had his Satyameva Jayate as one of the principles, truth at all costs, as he had ahimsa at all costs as a principle. Many of us would have our own personal principles in life. In the same way, principle means such a powerful thing that I will not give up come what may is very, very important when an organization or an individual thinks about TQM. The first and foremost is, even at the cost of repetition, I would say the first and foremost is customer focus. We have seen this in the definitions, and the first and foremost principle is customer focus. Understand your customer, understand their needs, and make sure that time and time again these needs are met and we deliver to the satisfaction or the delight of the customer. This is the key. The second principle is result orientation. That means we must understand that whatever processes we do, there is an end result in mind. There is an organizational result in mind, whether it is in financial terms, whether it is in people terms, whether it is in process terms, whatever. There are a key set of results that must be achieved for every hierarchy or every function in the organization. And therefore, the functions, the individuals, and the organization per se should be oriented towards what result I want to achieve. And these results, as we saw in the JUSE definition, these are objectives that are set forward by the organization for itself. Of course, in this current competitive scenario, we need to understand that if you want to maintain leadership, the most important aspect is to be better than the competition, to get better and to get faster, better. So therefore, we must be oriented towards this in our results. So all our activities, we must keep a simultaneous watch on how the results are coming. Results are only end. These are achieved through processes, and therefore the next aspect of principle is manage these results by processes and facts. Again, what is called as systemic thinking. So look at managing by the process and manage by facts. So results and processes always go together. It's like how you will see these excellent doubles teams in tennis. You will never, can differentiate between the two players. You will be amazed at the way they can read each other and they mesh with each other. In the same way, processes and results must be seamlessly viewed, and therefore we can keep improving our processes in order to achieve our results. So that's very important as a principle. The next two are leadership and constancy of purpose for improvement. So continuous improvement should be the mindset. What I do today must be one step better than yesterday. So I continuously work on improvements is one aspect. To achieve all of this, we need people with the right kind of competence and skills, and therefore people development and involvement is a big principle of TQM. So we develop people with the right set of skills and competence, and once we develop, we also have the right kind of vehicles, the right kind of motivation for them to be involved in the improvement. We have them involved in creating the process, and we have them involved in maintaining or improving the customer focus. Organization as a total has to be continuously learning. Individuals therefore have to be continuously learning. As I mentioned in the first or the third or fourth slide, one of the traits, one of the practices that made those individuals as world class was about continuous learning from their successes as well as from their mistakes and how they improve. So continuous learning is an important aspect. And innovation. You break away from the competition. You have to innovate and you maintain clear leadership. Incremental improvement is critical. At the same time, innovation is a very important aspect to maintain, to create the barrier, to create the difference from your next competitor and be ahead of the field. And partnership development, once again, not with just the customer focus aspect has already been touched upon this. Partnership development here would go to the other aspects like your suppliers, like your other subcontractors, even educational institutions which are going to provide you the continuous learning maybe, which are going to provide you the people. So how we work with the society, how we work with these educational institutions on not on transactional basis but on partnership basis is very important. And above all of this, or to bring up the last very important aspect in the context of a nation like ours, public responsibility, be it environmental, be it societal, be it governance, public responsibility is very, very important. And therefore, we can say out of many, these 8 aspects are very, very important as TQM principles. So when an organization sets out for TQM, the commitment is not only to have various practices about which we will see. The commitment is also towards the fact that we would follow these principles and we would follow them come what may. We would follow them and prove that by following this, we would enhance our business and maintain our business leadership. That's the beauty of these principles. Next aspect, as we saw from the jigsaw, is TQM systems. Now, what are the TQM systems? These are some unique systems by themselves. I have chosen to represent them through the Olympics circles. Now, why? Because these systems, as is the Olympic motto, helps you to get your results faster, to become faster in your processes, to reach higher with your results and performance, and to get stronger day by day in your business performance and in your own area of business. And therefore, my idea of visualization of these TQM systems, I felt that the Olympic rings represent this very well. Another aspect that needs to be seen or could be understood is the fact that these systems are not independent. These systems are interdependent. That means they work with each other. They have to be practiced with one another, and they help in the improvement and the implementation of each other. They give and they take from each of the other systems in its own way, and these systems are education and training. That is not necessarily in any order. Education and training, policy management, daily management, Kaizen systems, and cross-functional management are the key TQM systems that one could talk about. Of course, we have the presidential diagnosis and other aspects. They can be a part of some of these systems. So primarily we can say 5 key systems that need to be implemented. That is what giving the holistic picture of TQM to any organization. If we look, each one of them is a large chapter by itself. So I would not cover each one of them in great detail because it's impossible to do so in this session. But I would definitely give you an idea about, a short idea of what each of these systems is about. Sorry. An easier way or a more catchy way, I would say, to describe is what picture you see here. I'm sure many of you recognize this as the boat race that happens, the annual snake boat race that happens in Kerala. Now, why I use this picture is all about, there is direction from the top, from the left side that you see. There is a bit of routine management or repetitive work or daily management that has to be carried out by the various rowing people. There is continuous improvement that has to be done even during the race as well as from race to race by these people. There is a whole set of people motivation, people involvement, etc., which could be seen by the various people who are standing up and egging on their people, directing their people to move, etc. And of course, they need from various other aspects like cross-functionally, they need to work together. So I would say one of the very, actually speaking, most kind of games would adopt these TQM systems in one way or the other. I thought this is one of the pictures, a very different picture that would capture all these in a very nice way. If you look at what is education and training, Dr. Ishikawa made a statement that TQM begins and ends with education, which means there is no end. Continuous and continuous. As we saw earlier, one of the principles of TQM itself is continuous education and therefore leading to development and innovation. So TQM begins and ends with education. So education and training is very, very important. Education in a TQM way must cover all the levels of the organization. It's not necessary for one of the levels or some of the levels. Education must cover all the levels of the organization. At the same time, it should be appropriate to the level. It should be appropriate to the function. So most organizations that implemented this in a systematic way went about preparing a master plan, trying to identify for which function what kind of program is suitable. For example, if we talk about a tool like FMEA, I'm sure we recognize that it's most applicable to a manufacturing engineering, a quality assurance, and to some extent a manufacturing function. So these key functions need to be very well understanding this kind of a program. If we move into something like any other aspect, so each of those kind of programs have a specific relation to function, some of them critical, some of them to some extent. Of course, there are certain programs, certain training that needs education that has to go across the organization. So we need to identify this master plan so that this becomes a driver. And not only preparing, it must be implemented systematically year after year. So what it means is training moves from a man-hour output, number of man days based training, it moves towards competence based training. So organizations must try to understand what competence levels are required for it current to solve its problems and in the future to implement its strategies successfully, and those kind of things come into the master plan and they get implemented systematically year after year. Also the fact that this master plan is not cast in stone. It has got to be reviewed. It has got to be revised according to the business scenario. So when strategy changes, competence changes, and when competence change, automatically the education and training required changes. So this becomes a PDCA in itself, or we can say the other way, a CAPD in itself, when people try to check the current situation and take an action on that basis. So this is how TQM organizations approach education and training. Then there is a lot more behind this. Next comes policy management. Now what is policy management? It's nothing but the way of aligning the entire organization to the same goal. And this goal is not all about incremental improvements. These kind of goals which are taken under policy management are those which are driven by our strategy, which are driven by the breakthrough improvements that are required, which are the focus areas for the top management. So we can say that policy management is the way of aligning the organization to the top management perspective in terms of achieving breakthrough improvements over a period of time. And to make this happen, the head of the company, I have not used any designations here simply because we tend to have different designations. So the head of the company sets annual policies that should be achieved by the organization. As you can see here, when the policies are set, it's almost the dream or the vision of the top management that they should be achieved by the end of the year. And these annual policies are breakthrough items, and these annual policies are subsets of a midterm plan that the organization has made, which will move it towards the vision. And therefore, these annual policies have to be achieved if the organization has to be on a continuum towards the vision. And these policies taken up by the top management hence have to be breakthrough in nature or significant improvements over a period of time. I'm sorry for that error which came up on the last slide. I think there is some glitch in that. So we move on. The next component is what is daily management. If policy management was all about breakthroughs, daily management is the way of ensuring stable performance for the entire organization. So while improvements are a must, improvements are attractive. I'm sure all of us would agree that before we talk about improvement, stability in the current levels of performance is a basic given for us to have the ability to focus on the improvements. We have seen many organizations where without achieving a stability in performance, we try to move towards bigger goals, but actually half the time there is huge firefighting, and within the organization the key question always is, should I work for stability or now should I talk about breakthroughs? And most naturally, achieving the current level or keeping it stable wins over, and therefore organization tends to continue in the same manner. So unless you have stable performance, thinking about breakthrough improvements while it is good, becomes an impossibility to achieve. So it is very important that organizations ensure a stable performance across the organization. Most importantly, this is attributed to the operational levels. So DM largely ensures efficiency in routine activities, and which means it's largely addressing the operational management. And when this is done, and as DM is set up, one of the collateral things or one of the basic things that are required is that role and goal clarity are strengthened throughout the organization. So we get clear roles and goals for the operating people, thereby they are able to measure their performance at a much frequent levels. Now, many people, the first reflection when we see daily management is about thinking that it is what happens on an everyday basis, which is not so. DM is a word that describes routine activities. So DM gives us a clear way of ensuring efficiency in our routine activities. For some of us, the routine activity could be once in a week. For some, the routine activities could be even once in a quarter. Like for example, submitting a financial to a board or so. So we do this regularly every quarter. So the gamut of routine activities is unlimited, and of course the more amount of routine activities are done in the hierarchies down the line, whereas the breakthroughs, the focus for breakthroughs lie with the senior levels in the organization. And a basic building block for ensuring this levels of stability is the aspect of standardization. So standardization and routine management go very well together. In fact, we can even say that standardization is a requirement or a prerequisite for successful daily management. From here, if I switch to what are the methods, I'm not describing in great detail the other aspects. If you look at what are the methods, some names that we are familiar with, then the methods help us to implement the systems that we talked of. So the methods of TQM could be like 7 QC tools. It could be the 7 management tools, what is now called as the N7 or the new 7. Tools and techniques like FMEA, fault tree analysis, and so on and so forth. Higher order statistical methods and operational management tools, whether it is you're talking about a lean management, whether we are talking about TQM and so on and so forth. Similar even in non-manufacturing methods. Many times it's again a tendency, because TQM has evolved from a manufacturing setup, because quality management systems per se evolved more and more from the manufacturing organizational setups, a tendency to think that these largely are connected only with manufacturing, which is now many realize is not the right way. So all of these methods are equally applicable in non-manufacturing areas if you are talking about a manufacturing organization also, and any other organization like a service organization or a healthcare and so on and so forth. Very functional specific tools and practices. After all, the purpose of TQM is to achieve business objectives, and therefore the function specific tools, for example, if you take marketing, application of what you can call as a deep segmentation is one of the tools. Similarly, if you take let's say a materials function, a specific tool like a reverse auctions, etc., etc., how well you do it, all of these will come under the gamut of TQM. So it is up to the organization to understand what are the tools and techniques that would help me to improve my process as things stand today, and therefore what I should practice. Now, we can create, there are 2 ways to get to know these tools. You can benchmark with those practices that have happened, and when I say benchmark, It's not necessary that you should restrict yourself to your own type of industry. Better benchmarks have been achieved by people who broke away from their industry and who went across to other completely unconnected industries, who are able to take up. For example, even the famous JIT, which was got created from the supermarket, as many of us are aware. The supermarket practices of in the US were observed, and they were converted by Ono-san into the practice of JIT, and which has helped the manufacturing companies across the globe to a great extent in their control of inventory and so on and so forth. So, absorbing of such practices need not restrict to your own industry. Also be a creator of your own specific tools and practices, and therefore become a benchmark for other organizations. In fact, in examinations like the Deming, etc., there is a specific need for organizations to demonstrate some unique practices which can become the benchmark for others, or which others can replicate in their organization. So there is no limit to what you can call as methods of TQM. I have only listed here some things which have become built into the organizations over a long period of time. Now, implementing them is one angle. To be what you can call assessed by a panel of experts, to be certified or to be recognized that you are practicing TQM in an extraordinary way as a benchmark to other organizations is the immediate success that you can achieve. This is only a milestone in the implementation of TQM. The various awards and that we have for TQM or a business excellence implementation. What you see here is the Deming Prize, the Deming Medal. We see the Malcolm Baldrige Award, which is implemented in USA. We are seeing the EFQM Award, which is across Europe, and our own CII Exim Bank Award for Excellence. Some of you must have already been on this path of CII Exim or a Deming Prize, etc., and who have definitely seen excellent growth in business performance by implementing these. There are various stages which we can implement, and there are various levels of recognition. If you are a Deming Prize company and you continue to practice and improve your TQM, you move to the Grand Deming Prize. In the CII Exim Award, there are various levels or stages of recognition that are got. So these awards and models should tend to act as milestones, should tend to act as testimonies for our implementation of TQM. We must recognize that they are not the end result. Business performance is the end result, and these are milestones that represent that we have achieved certain stages of maturity or the implementation, and thereby give us the boost to move to the next level. In fact, the responsibility on the organization once it achieves these levels becomes much more tremendous, because you have become a benchmark and you need to maintain those standards. How are these awarded? Like the pictures that I showed, there are much more concrete models which are used by these organizations when they award such the recognitions. For example, the Deming Prize model is based on the 6 aspects that we see here, and when you read them, you will reflect that it carries the TQM systems or practices or principles in a different way. The top management or the policy management is represented in the box number 1. The kind of basic systems that are required for different aspects of business is represented by box number 4, and how these systems are in practice is seen in the maintenance and improvement of product and operational qualities. By maintenance, it means routinely how do you sustain, and the innovation aspect, the freshness aspect in new product development, and the principle of data and facts. And in the current world of IT, how do we utilize IT smartly to collect and analyze my data is shown in box 5, and the base building of human resource development is shown in box 6. So Deming model again talks about all of these aspects of a TQM organization. The organization is evaluated by expert panel of assessors, and you get to know where you stand in this model. In the same way, the CII Exim Bank Business Excellence model again talks of the enablers. As you can see, the 5 boxes there, very similar to what we saw in the previous model. The beauty of these models is that they are very similar in nature, but they are not the same, but very, very similar in nature. Some of them clearly spell out what is expected. Some models would ask the company to evolve themselves, and then the evaluation is done. The CII Exim Bank model consists of these levels of enablers which drive the results, and therefore, now going back to what I mentioned in the beginning, one of the TQM principles of result orientation, but acting on based on the results, comes back as innovation and learning back into the enablers. So in this way, we have a different model for business excellence or TQM. So different countries, different the assessing bodies have got different models. More so, many organizations have created their own model based on this. We have, in India, we have various models like the Tata Business Excellence model. We have the TBEM as it's called. Mahindra has got the Mahindra way. We have the TVS model for TQM and so on and so forth. I'm just naming what has come to the top of my mind. So different organizations have got their own models which are taking out these principles and these systems and trying to put them together in such a way it reflects their organization culture and their organizational requirements. But they derive mostly out of these international models that we have seen just now. These models, when they give you the way to go about the promotion, the key factor that we must remember when we do a TQM promotion is what we see in the picture here. Okay, we can say that a business would comprise of practices. We have seen this in the beginning. Practices together bundled up lead to systems, and systems, when they are practiced, when they are time and time again utilized, lead to some business results. Now, how does one go about TQM promotion? There are 2 different approaches that organizations take. The first one is, I understand my business model and therefore I try to design my systems or improve my existing systems. If you are an ongoing organization, you will not be without any basic systems. So all that you need to know is, for the future, what kind of changes are required in my systems, and to achieve those changes, what kind of practices that I need to modify, what kind of practices I need to improve. So all this need to be taken up. Now, another way to look at this, what is it? No, there was a...
No, I can take.
Sorry. So, another way to look at this is, I have some practices and therefore I know about some practices. I can take some practices from other organizations and thereby I will create my systems and hopefully it will help my business. You know, the first model is like saying, tomorrow is my birthday and therefore I need to buy a cake. The second one is to say that I have a cake and therefore tomorrow must be my birthday. So obviously, as we have seen earlier from the definitions of TQM, it is the business objectives that must drive the practices and not the other way about. So if we want to take a fresh look at our TQM, when we want to implement TQM, the first and foremost question to ask is, where should my business go? What is my vision? And therefore, to achieve this business improvements, what I should do with my systems and therefore what I should do with my practices. it may not be very prudent. It's good to understand from the organizations that have won Deming Prize, etc., etc. But we need to be careful in adopting these practices so that they will help our business. It's very important that therefore we must be always business driven to fine tune our practices. Practices are finally the reality that happens day in and day out. So unless they are tuned to the business, they will go a waste for the organization. Sorry. So having gone through the various things, it takes a long time for any organization to implement TQM, no doubt about it. This is not just a 1 month or a 2 month story. It's not a one small project. It's definitely a long-term project because you have to start building the culture and so on and so forth. It's required. Broadly, we can say that it can be divided into 4 phases. It's just an illustrative example, and the phase 1 could generally be a declaration by the top management on the intent of implementing TQM. Like I mentioned, what manner will it, what is needed for TQM, business, where is it going, and therefore why today we need to look at TQM. It's very important to be reflected by the top management and communicated across, and followed by the education and training. The promotion aspects of TQM need to be taken care. The phase 2 would then, having gone through the training, introduce various systems that we saw like DM, daily management or policy management or Kaizen system, etc. Move on to the phase 3, look at cross-functional management. I have not touched great details of this. Improve the business processes, and then to keep the promotional aspect, look at intra-organizational TQM competitions, the quality month celebrations and the quality month QC circle competitions, etc. Both look at it from internal viewpoint and the external viewpoint because they definitely serve as motivation and a big platform for learning both internally and externally. And we need these kind of celebrations from time to time to keep the motivation up for TQM implementation. And the phase 4 would be challenge the award. And needless to say, phase 5 and so on is continue, improve. So once you are on this path, it's only a question of continuous improvement and looking at the business, keep making the changes. What are the key success factors? The key success factors could be, or definitely are, from the top management view, commitment, visible zeal. That means the top management has to actually be present when, let's say, a QC circle competition takes place, actually commit a lot of its time towards TQM implementation, because not only it is not a question of driving through fear, it is a question of driving through promotion and driving through personal commitment. And trust me, every organization where this has happened, TQM has become a way of life in the respective organization. There are many examples. I don't want to name one and miss the other. There are many such examples that we can recall. And top management very clearly has to set the direction. It comes from vision. It also comes from the direction for this year, the direction for next year, and so on. Next important aspect or a key success factor is how well total employee involvement is created in continuous improvement. Total employee involvement therefore means in continuous improvement aspects. The third is creation of purposive systems. We have seen, as I mentioned, there are many systems that need to be created. Create them, implement them in such a way that it helps our business. Again and again I am repeating this because sometimes the tendency is to create a system for the sake of system. TQM for the sake of TQM is of no use to anybody. So TQM should be towards achieving our business goal. That is again and again we must remember in our mind and actions. So creation of purposive systems for the organization. Skills development in the methods and tools that we talked about. And as I said, implementing TQM is not a 100-meter sprint. Implementing TQM is like running a marathon. it's definitely a long-term story, and therefore we need a long-term discipline in mind. We need a long-term commitment from every person in the organization, and therefore tireless discipline, because discipline, as the word says, is something that all of us tend to run away from. Whether it's on the road, whether it is anywhere else, general tendency. I'm talking about the large majority of us, and not to those small minority, I would say. So a large majority always shies away from discipline. But a key success factor for TQM is discipline to follow the systems that have been created, discipline to follow the methods and tools, and discipline to bring out the negatives that happen so that they can be quickly corrected. And keep yourself flexible, adapt very quickly to the business needs, thereby make changes in your systems and practices. Motivation is a great requirement, as I mentioned, celebrations and so on and so forth. Motivation can be in different forms, not necessarily only monetary. So it can be just a pure recognition, a pat from a senior management to the shop floor if somebody has done a very good Kaizen. It's a great motivator for him to go forward and submit next 6 Kaizens next month. So motivation to all levels in the organization from the relevant people is very important. And to sum up all of this, relentless PDCA should be the mindset at all levels. Whatever I do not say that this is the best. So whatever I do, whatever I practice, I always keep my mind open. The organization keeps a mind open to understand the results and make the changes that is required. So again, as I mentioned, if you look at it, the CAPD, the check, what happens, and then the act and the plan and the do. The PDCA mind wheel, rotating it, should be the mindset at all levels in the organization. So some of the key success factors, I would possibly say some of the top ones have been, I've tried to capture here. So these need to be very well recognized by the organization as we implement TQM. And what are the benefits? Right at the beginning, I had shown various results. Now, if we look at it in a qualitative manner, management policy breakthroughs is developed and the alignment and achievement is ensured. It is focused new product development towards customer requirement. Many business processes tend to get reorganized. There is active reorganization of business processes, not passive, not passively copying from another company. Systematic and continual workplace improvements. Very strong interdepartmental coordination. We talked about CFM. I did not explain it in great detail, but this is what it means. Strong interdepartmental coordination, whether it is to implement policy levels or whether it is to implement a cross-functional process. Very good coordination between the departments. Human resource development and capability building aligned to strategy, what they call as SHRM, strategic HRM, which is oriented to achieve the company goals and companies' long-term goals, companies' differentiating goals. Systematic data collection, analysis and improvement. Remember the principle that we talked about, that we will talk with data and facts. So very systematic data collection, analysis and improvement will automatically become the nature of the people. Definite to enhance employee satisfaction, no doubt about it. Many times I've heard the counselors say, and I myself have personally experienced it during the Deming Prize journey or other TQM implementations in the organizations that I had the opportunity to work for, is during this phase, automatically people tend to recall in their whole work time as some of the key period in their work career is when TQM was getting implemented in full swing. By all of this, all the points that we stated here, strengthening the organizational constitution. That means I overall build the organizational constitution. I go back to my example of a fitness regimen that one takes up. We are not talking about a temporary patch of improvement in one area or the other. We talk about the entire wellness or the entire individual constitution going up when you have multiple practices like physical fitness, like the yoga and so on and so forth. People talk about the whole overall wellness is a term that has become very catchy. In the same way, if we implement TQM, we can say that automatically the organizational constitution improves over a period of time. So this is all that I had to say about implementation of TQM towards achieving the business results. So just as a recap, we have gone through the purpose. We have seen some of the outstanding effects achieved by organizations that have implemented TQM. And from there, we have also seen what or how TQM has got evolved over a period of time, how it has evolved from a quality perspective, how it has evolved from a management perspective, and we then moved on to understand what is the definition of TQM, and then we went into the key aspects of the components of TQM, namely principle, methods, and practices, and we try to understand a bit more in detail about the various systems like policy management, daily management, etc., etc. As I mentioned, these are separate topics by themselves, and which hopefully, along with CAI, we should be in a position to make it like a TQM series and try to see what we can contribute to improve the awareness on these different systems over a period of time. And we looked at, therefore, what are the models, how can one organization go about, and when we implement these along these models, what kind of global recognition that one can get. And to summarize, we have seen what are the key success factors and the benefits of TQM. This is how we have gone through today's session. I hope, as I promised in the beginning, that for those who are fresh into TQM, this has given a nice input about the basics, and for those who are already practicing, this has helped you to find a few more nuggets of gold in the vast listing of TQM as a treasure. Thank you. Now is the time for your questions. I look forward to many questions and hope to answer most of them. Somebody else said next week. This is not open, so audio is muted, they said. SSL. SSL. How do we know how many people are currently present? The first question has come up here. It's from Dr. Prahlad Vaghela. It says, we have achieved certain milestones towards our continual improvement journey and now targeting for Deming Prize. It says here, let us advise for the consulting or the way forward mechanism. Now, See, if you're looking at Deming price as a target, now as you have mentioned, we need to clearly understand, set ourselves a target in how many years we want to achieve, Dr. Prahlad, and we definitely have to look at how we look at some consultants, definitely having the consultants help. So we should look at how we can go forward. So the most important thing is to have yourself a time frame. I would say maybe a 5-year span or so, looking at the size of your company. Definitely something like 4 to 5 years is a very good period by which you can build the TQM practices. And to start with, you can look at the Deming Price Juice website. I'm repeatedly this thing because you also mentioned about Deming Price. So look at the Deming Price site to understand what are the requirements. And if I can be of any help, it'll be a pleasure. The second one has come from Mr. Venkatesh. He's thanked me from TAFE. He's thanked me for the rich inputs. Thank you, Mr. Venkatesh, for your kind words. And I hope TAFE also achieves. I know you are in the CIA Business Excellence very highly ranked. I hope you will be able to achieve much more through the use of TQM. Yeah. The next question also is from Mr. Venkatesh. Now it's a question. It reads as, we at TAFE are following the EFQM model. How to strengthen TQM initiatives towards achieving business excellence. Now, it is just a model. So EFQM is the model you have chosen to follow, perfectly valid. And all that we need to understand is you have now a very clear assessment mechanism. I'm sure about it. So we have very qualified assessors, intercompany it happens, and we are also from CIA directly. So what we need to understand is which are the pockets currently, whether we have some weaknesses. If so, how can I strengthen those aspects? So what are the practices that are required in this area? Like I mentioned, if the model is not very prescriptive about the practices, we can understand from some of the other organizations practicing TQM. And number two is, more importantly, keep communicating this message to the organization that we need to strengthen and which areas. So overall, TQM is one aspect. Which pockets of TQM, which are the initiatives that you want to achieve? More so, what is that you want to achieve from business objective? That's very important. So the business objectives must be clearly set, and based on that, we need to understand what practices we need to improve or which initiatives. At this moment, that's the the most best answer that I can give. Definitely try to communicate very clearly what we look at and do that aspect. I hope I have answered to the best possible extent at this point of time. We'll definitely, when we interact next, we will definitely look at it much more specifically. The next question has come from Dr. Prahlad once again. He's asked the question, let us just brief about Hoshin Kanri. Okay, Hoshin Kanri is nothing but the shining needle. It's the other name for the Japanese name for policy management that I described here. I had specifically not used many Japanese terms, okay, primarily because of easier understanding. I use the now much accepted English terminologies. Hoshin Kanri is nothing but the policy management that I described. So it is about the company having a long-term vision, a mid-term plan, and therefore how we move towards the mid-term plan. Hence the word shining needle. So how do I move towards that mid-term plan? What are the breakthroughs that I must achieve? And therefore, what are the ways which I can do? So the head of the organization has to set these as policies, and from this policy we need to understand what are the major measures that need to be taken. Measures here meaning what are the steps that need to be taken to achieve this improvement. Let's say, for example, one of the major measures, if you wanted to improve rejection or reduce rejections, maybe by an analysis of your situation, it could be improving process capability. So we need to work on improving process capability is an example. So once you define these measures, they must get converted into actionables and get implemented down the line. Now the strength of this process, converting from a dream of the top management into action at the actionable level, is what is claimed to be the differentiator in Hoshin Kanri compared to what they call as a MBO, etc., etc. This is what is the stated advantage of a Hoshin Kanri in a very structured manner. It has the involvement of every superior guiding his next level, what we call as a catch ball. So this is just about all, and then a review process follows. In a very brief way, this is Hoshin Kanri. Like I mentioned, a separate topic by itself. Hopefully someday we will have a webinar or a session only on this subject. It's a full day subject by itself. The next question has come from, next three questions in fact, have come from Mr. P. Nalluchami, right? The first one talks about, it thanks me. I'm thankful to you for, for your patient listening and participation. The question here is, in your opinion, how can we link PM and DM to achieve the goals? A very, very important question. If you see some of the textbooks, if you can see some of the models which have been made, Dr. Shoji Shiba has given a very nice model for this, which is reflected in many books. Now, what happens is, as we understand DM, let's start from DM. This is like a chain which is linked together. I always give the example of the front wheel and the back wheel of a bicycle linked by a chain is how we can describe PM and DM. One cannot move without the other. So what happens? Let's assume you have implemented DM. There are always some minor problems that is going to come up. These will be solved within the gamut of DM, small improvements. But there are some recurring issues that would happen. Now these recurring issues have to be solved by higher level involvement, and some more time and money, investments, etc. are required, and therefore this becomes a subject for top management to take up. So it moves to the policy management area. So whatever is the unsolved problem, a chronic issue from the DM moves to the PM domain. Of course, by prioritization, it is taken up. Now, that doesn't mean that PM is only for problem solving. We also have to keep in mind there is a midterm vision that has got to be continuously implemented. So those kind of points come through PM. And whatever you do, I mentioned during Hoshin Kanri question, I mentioned about actionables. So those actions that we have taken, how they get standardized and become the new practice, it goes into DM. So now therefore, PM now gives the feed into DM for new or revised practices or improved practices. So in this way, DM and PM are continuously linked to achieve the organizational goals. Right? That was your first question, Mr. Nalluchami. The second question you talked about, is there any standards to follow TQM? Now, if the question is about model, I talked about different models, right? So we have the Deming Price model. We have got the EFQM model as another fraternity member has expressed, which is the CIA Business Excellence. So all of this you can call as models, whether they are standards, especially models like Deming, they want you to evolve. There are no certifying standards as such, like a TS or a other EMS and so on and so forth. And if you can see the Deming Price model once again, you can see that all these management systems for quality, for cost, delivery, etc., are the basics. So using this standards, we need to build our TQM. That's the main aspect about standards to follow in TQM. Many practices have now come to be in a very, very indirect way have come to be followed as standards. For example, if you are talking about skill matrix, is become now a standard to use the Black Circle University concept and so on. So but there is no specific. Nobody tells that you should follow this method. That's the underlying beauty of TQM models. Next question also from Mr. Naluchami. It is to know how to know the present status of TQM culture in our organization. Now, culture is a very, very big question. I am not competent enough to answer culture. When you say about TQM culture, now look at the aspects that I mentioned. Are people always focused on continual improvement? Are people talking with data and facts? Now, if there is regularity of meetings, is there meetings in a planned manner? Is it happening? If you take a review meeting, for example, is there a schedule? Do people stick to the schedule? Okay, so the various principles that I have talked about, just keep an eye on whether these are being followed. Now, in organizations, sometimes, for example, people will shy away from continuous improvement. That means the TQM culture is not seeped in. Another aspect is SOPs will get violated left, right, and center. SOPs will be lying, but they'll be only to decorate the wall. Nobody will be following it. Now, these are clear indications that there is no culture which is being followed. Okay, so look at these kind of signs to evaluate. Whether this can become a checklist, I would not say. When it is a question of culture, checklisting a culture is a very difficult thing to do or a needless thing to do. So try to observe and get this feel. And of course, the different models that we expressed have all got ways of assessing. They do not tell you about the culture per se. They can give you an indirect hint about the culture. That's it. So that's a way one should look at how the TQM culture has seeped into the organization. So if your watchman says, sir, yesterday I was doing like this, now how can I improve, becomes his question, that means you have made it. That means you have built a culture of TQM right from your gate. So look at it from that viewpoint. Next is also from Dr. Prahlad, which says, thanks. I'm also equally thankful, Dr. Prahlad, for your patient participation and your kind words, and look forward to various opportunities to meet you or work with you. Thanks a lot. The next one is from Ritu, it says, from a buying agency, right? Again, it says thanks. Okay, you're welcome. Appreciate that. And it clearly says this whole system is new for all of us here. And don't worry, Ritu, you're not the only one, or your team is not the only one here. As I mentioned, I think from what you are mentioning here, it's like a service agency. So it is taking a time for TQM to spread across all the kinds of sectors. It has still got a lot of roots in manufacturing sector and other pockets, but definitely there are no limits. So you can look at very soon how it can spread to your organization, right? And the query it says is, we being in service industry, our performance depends on the performance and reactivity of our suppliers and contractors. How TQM being applied internally in the organization will help us to streamline the contractor's performance? Very, very good question. So the first clarification that I would like to make is, recall the model of promotion. If your business is driven by external partners like suppliers and contractors, now our focus should largely also move on to them. This is what is called as deployment of TQM to the suppliers and contractors. Now, to serve as a model for them, you need to be a model organization, and therefore it's imperative for you to understand TQM very well. So imperative for your organization to implement TQM, but at the earliest opportunity or even concurrently, please try to move this to suppliers and contractors, which includes support. It is not just a question of directing them to implement TQM. All successful TQM organizations have supported their suppliers and contractors in implementing TQM. So therefore, it's important for you to support and help your subcontractors suppliers or contractors to implement TQM. That's the main thing which has to be done. Okay. So if you do this very well, and if you go about and implement this, and you can always understand, for the sake of getting results and catching the attention, look at which subcontractor, make some selection about some parts of the organization which is focused with these subcontractors, suppliers, where you want to implement TQM. So in this manner, prioritize and implement. Prioritization is a very key aspect in TQM. So do that very well. I hope I have answered that question. Okay. Now, Mr. Venkatesh has asked me for my contact details. I am happy to provide them. I will just read them out now, Mr. Venkatesh. Can you please note them down if you wouldn't mind? My email ID is peopletreeconsulting@gmail.com. It's very simple. If you take the name of my company, the first 4 are my initials, BSRs. The rest is the email ID. So you can say peopletreeconsulting@gmail.com is my ID. And my mobile number is 97909 24542. This is the number for my mobile number. So you can give me a ring anytime, you can touch base, and hope we can work together. Thank you for asking that. Now, the next question also is from Mr. Venkatesh to, I think the same he has put here, about assessing the TQM culture. I answered this for Mr. Nalluchami. As I mentioned, there are no, I have not come across any specific, checklist. So more importantly, you please look at it from the various principles are demonstrated: continuous improvement, data-based, and discipline. All this, please look at it. Discipline from the sense of following SOP and so on. I'm repeating for the sake of Mr. Venkatesh, he has asked that question. Okay, my mobile number is 97909 24542. You can straight away give a ring. Of course, it is muted now, but please give a ring. I'll get back to you. I have noted the time, and I will take the incoming call is yours. So those 2 questions about the culture, I think I have given the answer in the best possible manner. So look at it from that viewpoint. And if I come across any specific, I would not say, whether we should create a checklist to do this, because cultures, I think, I once again repeat, culture should be more measured by observation and feel rather than by very, very hard tools. Is my way of looking at it. I'm not saying that is the right way, but by and large, I think that is the way it should be. I hope I have answered all your questions, Mr. Venkatesh. Okay, the next question is about assessment versus audit. Okay, largely you can say audit is against a set of stated needs. Okay, audit is against a kind of a set rules that are there. We know about TQM audit, etc., etc. So it is about auditing for set practices, whether it is being followed or not followed. The assessments go a little bit beyond. They try to understand even what is unstated, right? They go beyond just the stated points. It goes beyond and tries to understand what is the overall perspective of this slightly bigger picture. So you need not necessarily reflect to the company said this, is it following or not following. So today you will notice that even during some of the system audit, the experienced auditors go one step beyond and try to look at it. And experienced assessors in CII, those who go across, etc., are always being, coached to look at assessment in this manner. Go beyond what is stated in the document and try to see the overall health. And I mean the same about the culture assessment. Definitely I am not reflecting about an audit. Culture assessment, I would say, should be done in the same way. Talk to people, get a feel for the overall thing. In fact, here I would try to recall in one of the companies when Japanese was going on, the assessment for some Deming Prize or so, the shop floor people presented a QC story and they presented it in the vernacular language, okay, in the local language. And sure, you can appreciate that not even one word of it could be understood by the Japanese. There is not much interpretation done because of lack of time. So some glimpses they were looking, they also said no interpretation. But you know what still remained in my memory is when they got back, the examiner, as they are called, or the assessors, capped it by saying, I'm not worried about what is the content. I could see the light of happiness, the light of involvement in this person's eye, and that to me talks a lot about the improvement culture in the organization. So assessment should not be viewed, should be viewed from this kind of viewpoint. Observe and see what happens. Of course, you also get some flags when people have observed something which is against what we have been talking to them in the presentation. So assessment normally goes a lot more into observation and absorbing. That's very, very important in an assessment. I hope this is a better answer than what I gave or adds to what I gave earlier.
Any other questions?
Any other questions from any of the participants on the other side? We still got about 10 minutes, I think. So please feel free to shoot your questions. Mr. Venkatraj, earlier there was a question. It came in the name of Mr. Naluchami. I answered it about the culture. So the answer, I think, also this thing to you. And though it has come, the asker was Naluchami, I answered it by saying Mr. Naluchami. It's more to you having asked the question. Yeah. We've got the question here. Mr. Samuel has asked me for my mobile number. I'm repeating it once again. It's 97909 24542. 97909 24542. In case you again would like to contact anytime, and if you haven't got the ID that I mentioned, you can also refer to Mr. Kannan. I'm sure he's your contact person here in TCII, and CII has kindly agreed to connect us up after this kind of webinar. Connect me with the organizations like yourselves, so that we can take forward TQM practices. So, Mr. Samuel, I think hope you have noted down my number. Please feel free also to get in touch with through CII. Going back to the question that has last appeared here, it's about strengthening TQM practices in marketing and sales. Is there any inputs on how to bring them in the group? Is it going to help the organization significantly? I will not mention the person who has asked. It is a very, very good question. Since many of us, as I mentioned repeatedly, since it all started from manufacturing, the tendency is to believe that TQM is for manufacturing. Then there is no question of T. So we need to bring marketing and sales, definitely. You cannot do without bringing them into TQM practices, because after all, they are the face of the customer in the organization, and they are the organization's face in with the customer. So we need to bring marketing and sales into TQM. What we need to understand, not only in marketing, this is equally applicable to most of the other, what I would call as enabler function. People call it as support functions and many names. I would call it as an enabler function, learning from the CII model. So we need to bring all the functions. Now, how do we do that? Some of the systems and practices like TQM systems like daily management, etc. So if you are a TQM promoter, try to understand the way marketing goes about their routines, and then try to modify the way that you have done from manufacturing into marketing. Simple example, we need not require a visible board for marketing area. If your marketing area in such a way, I cannot put up a board like I'll do in shop floor, so be it. We can always tell them, let it be on your computers. Only thing is, it must be the data and the graphs must be applicable equally. But there are certain things like a role description, there are certain things like SOPs, etc. that are a must, whatever is the function. What SOPs will help them? We need to sit with them and we need to understand the SOPs that would help them to operate and try to make it for them. And of course, you can always take them to organizations where marketing and sales have also applied these very well. I know, for example, many places where marketing and sales led the organization in applying a higher order statistical tool like regression analysis. Everybody thinks regression analysis is to do with rejection control. No. Marketing and sales repeatedly have done in some organizations, applied this to improve their business. So there is no doubt that it is imperative that marketing and sales, and not only them, others come into the picture, and we need to strengthen TQM practices across the organization. So it will significantly help the organization, no doubt about it. If you go without them, it is only QMS, simple area within it will become like shop floor and operations. It is not so. We should go beyond, no doubt about it. Yeah, I understand, Mr. Venkatesh. It is definitely a challenge. It is definitely a challenge, no doubt about it. But without challenge, what is the fun in implementing TQM, let us say? So it will be a challenge, but it can definitely be overcome. And the key is, as they always say, if you read some of this one, the success for a TQM facilitator is not only to know the TQM tools and techniques. It's important to know a little bit about every function in the organization so that we can appreciate every role and we can take them from that. So, but it can definitely be done, no doubt about it. You understand about, let us say, for example, Boston Consulting Group matrix by yourself, simple ones, and talk about it with marketing. Then they will know that you also are involved with them in their understanding. Otherwise, it's always believed that a TQM person is a shop floor person. Definitely do it similarly for a HR. We should do it similarly for materials, anywhere for that matter. Yeah, can inform them. Are there any further questions? If not, we are planning to close in the next 2-3 minutes. It's 5 o'clock already, I think. So we are planning to close straight away. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. As I mentioned, any further queries you have, I have some of you have directly asked for my ID and this one which I have provided, and you can get in touch with me direct. You can also get in touch with me through CII, Mr. Kannan, and we will definitely interact. Not this thing at all. Together, if we promote TQM as it said, we will improve the constitution of the entire state and the entire country and so on and so forth, to speak very high level. Thanks a lot and I appreciate your attention. Goodbye.